Hi, everybody. Charles Hoskinson here, live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Actually, it's kind of cold and gloomy, although the snow is starting to melt a little bit. Boy, it was a terrible whiteout when I was driving down from Cheyenne to here. It's been a tough few days. So, a few updates, and you know what? I guess we get to finally do an AMA. How about that? Surprise AMA. Yay! Surprise AMA. Woo! Well, hello, Khalid from Morocco. Lovely country. A lot of stuff going on. Committee just signed the latest change management document. I was the last in the chain, so I signed it today for changing the D parameter from 0.52 to 2.5. That means we are just about to cross a threshold here in a little bit for D to fall below 5, which means more than half of all the blocks will be made by the community, not the OPFT nodes. That's a major milestone, and at this current rate of velocity, it looks like D will decrement to 0 around March. So lots to do, lots to talk about. The product update in 2 days, we'll go ahead and talk about that. But it crossed my desk today, and I was really happy and excited about that. And it seemed like yesterday that D was equal to 1, and people were complaining that we delayed it by an epoch. And now we're almost at 50%. For those of you who want parameter level changes, K-level changes, they are coming, and there's an enormous internal conversation about it. And we've written up a PowerPoint presentation and a philosophy document about why things were designed the way that they're designed. My chief scientist has put an enormous amount of time into this. Agalos is very passionate about this particular topic. And what I'm going to do is similar to the security video that I did, where I did an hour-and-a-half discussion about a best practice for security. I'm going to actually do a screencasted video where I talk about this philosophy document. And I'm going to read the entire document with annotations with you guys and kind of talk through it. It might end up being quite a long video. It could be several hours long. But I think it's really important to talk around the design philosophy of this. You know, it's kind of funny. Everybody, when they see a cryptographic paper or math paper, they tend to just say, okay, you guys figure that out. No one's an expert in cryptography or math, and you don't really get strong opinions about it. But game theory, despite the fact that the topic's as complex and in some cases more complex, you tend to get a lot of opinions, and everybody's a game theorist. So there was an enormous amount of thought that went into the design of the system, the parameters of the system, everything from the reward functions to other things. And it's very important that we explain that thought process in as detailed of a way as possible, at least the philosophy behind it. Then I feel that the community is in a really good position to start working on the change management. It is my position that I'd love to see K largely increased. I do think that the software needs some improvements to get there, especially partial delegation portfolios, and some enhancements into the operation of staking. Especially I'd love to see the existence of hybrid wallets where you have a cold part and a hot part. And we've had a lot of conversations about that, and we will present some of the progress in that matter at the product updates, if not this October, certainly in November. A lot of commercialization going along, a lot of things going on and floating around, and commercial teams working hard. As I mentioned, we have a lot of deals in the pipeline. The Wyoming event was half political, half sales. We were really looking into e-voting, and we had very productive conversations along those lines. It is my goal that Cardano e-voting software is used in political primaries, and my hope is for eventually it to be used in municipal and state and eventually federal elections, and then in national elections for countries like Ethiopia, Mongolia, and other places. Now, there is a long road to get there, and many little victories that have to begin, but this event in Wyoming was kind of the opener into that conversation. There were 7 independent parties at the Independent National Convention, and we had a chance to talk to leadership of many of them. We will also engage in conversation with the Libertarian Party leadership as well, and at the very least we could talk about e-voting and also blockchain-based voting for primaries. That would be a great start. And we'll also look into the state of Wyoming for that as well. So we'll tell you guys about that in time. We've already gotten a lot of inquiries about e-voting software. We tend to get them along with the PRISM inquiries. It's actually quite easy to start conversations, but there are a lot of security properties that are very important, like end-to-end verifiability, hybrid ballots where you have both a digital and a paper ballot, delegation mechanics as well as privacy mechanics that are, interesting on a case-by-case basis. So we'll keep chipping away at that. A lot of Goguen stuff to talk about, but I'm going to reserve all of that for 2 days from now for the product update. We're right in the middle of all of Goguen. Metadata was the very first part of it. We already have some commercialization of the platform as a result of metadata. More to come. And then obviously lots of smart contract stuff to come. So this update and the November update are going to be very, Goguen focused. And also a lot of Voltaire news as well. We're still on schedule for an HFC event in, I think, November or December. I can't remember. But that's going to be carrying a lot of things related to multi-sig, token locking. There's some ledger rule changes, so it has to be an HFC event. And that opens up a lot of the windows for Goguen foundations as well as voting on chain. So Fund 3 will benefit very heavily from that. And we're right in the guts of Daedalus right now, building the voting center, the identity center, QR code work, all this stuff. It's a lot of stuff. The cell phone app was released last week, kind of an early beta. It'll go through a lot of rapid iterations. Every few weeks we'll update it. Google Play is a great foundation to launch things on because it's so easy to push updates to people automatically. So you can rapidly iterate and be very agile in that framework. And we've already had 3,500 people involved heavily in the innovation management platform idea scale, and we've got numerous bids from everything from John Buck in the sociocracy movement to others, and a lot of people want to help us improve that, and we're going to see steady and systematic growth there. We're still chipping away at product marketing. Liza she's doing a good job. Meet with her 2-3 times a week, and right now it's Ouroboros, Ouroboros, Ouroboros. We're doing competitive analysis of Ouroboros versus EOS, Tezos, Algorand, F2, and Polkadot. We think that's a good set of people. We think we have a really good way of explaining it. David Orr has already made some great content. We're going to release that soon alongside some other content, and we'll keep chipping away at that. We also just hired a creative director for IO Global. His name's Adam. Incredibly experienced creative director. He's worked for Mercedes-Benz and dozens of other companies. He does very good work, and he's been doing this for well over 20 years. And so the very first set of things he's going to do is work with commercial and marketing on product marketing. So in addition to building great content, our hope is to make that content as pretty as possible. And we have Rod heavily involved in that as well to talk about distribution channels and see if we can amplify the distribution message and really get a lot of stuff done. Last thing to mention, iOS for Catalyst, we're working on that. We submitted it to the Apple Store, the iOS Store, but it takes a little longer to get approval for that than it does with Google Play. But that's been submitted, and it's whenever Apple approves it or not. It takes a little longer for cryptocurrency stuff in them. Wikipedia kind of rattled the cage a little bit. Through an intermediary, we got contact with Jimmy Wales. Larry Sanger, the other co-founder, also reached out to me, and the Everpedia guys reached out to me. So here's where we stand. We have an article. It has solidified. It's currently labeled as unreliable, and you should not believe the things that are said in it, which is David Gerard's work if you look at the edits. We will work with the community and try to get that article to a fair and balanced representation of Cardano, and especially after the product marketing comes through and we clearly explain the product. I think the Cardano article can be massively strengthened. I've told Rod to work with some specialized people to try to get that done, but we are going to work very hard at a systematic approval campaign for all of the scientific articles related to blockchain technology in the cryptocurrency space. They're just terrible. If you go to the proof of work article, the proof of stake, or all these things, they're just terrible. They're not well written, they're out of date, and they don't reflect an adequate sampling of the science. So I did talk to my chief scientist, Agalos, and what we're going to do is reach out to the scientific counterparts at most of the major cryptocurrency groups that are doing research and see if they want to work with us at an industry-wide effort to systematically improve the scientific articles in our industry so that they're a fair and balanced representation of what the current state of the art are, the criticisms, the trade-offs, as well as the reference base. And of course, obviously, we'll do quite well in that respect because we've done the science and we're the inheritor of it. But it's a shame because when people search proof of stake on Google, usually Wikipedia results are highly biased. We care about Wikipedia because Google cares about Wikipedia and Amazon cares about Wikipedia. If you ask Alexa, who is Charles Hoskinson, the reason why Alexa knows is because it's reading directly from the Wikipedia page. If I didn't have a Wikipedia page, Alexa would know that. So if somebody says, Alexa, what is Cardano? It's going to read directly from the Wikipedia page. And we can either just pretend that reality doesn't exist, or we can accept it, and we as a community, working with partners and the broader cryptocurrency community, can universally improve the quality of cryptocurrency pages. There's been a pattern of commercial censorship on Wikipedia for cryptocurrencies in general since Bitcoin itself. In fact, I think the Bitcoin article was actually taken down once back in, might have been 2010 or 2009, but basically, Wikipedia has not been a friend of cryptocurrencies. That's why Everpedia exists. And actually, their founders reached out to me, and I talked to them over Twitter through PMs, and we agreed to actually do a podcast. So I'm going to do a StreamYard stream with these guys, and they'll come on, talk all about Everpedia and what they do and how they are, and we'll kind of go through the challenges that they've encountered and how their platform works and so forth. And obviously, if they want to ever leave that terrible ecosystem EOS and come to the holy great land of Cardano, we'd be there to help them out. But at least they can tell the world how amazing their product is and also the challenges they're having to overcome. We've also been in great contact with Larry Sanger. He's going to do an internal seminar at some point with us. And talk about some protocols he's been developing since he left Wikipedia, specifically to decentralize knowledge management and have a truly decentralized encyclopedia. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope that presentation gives us some inspiration as an ecosystem of things we can do. Now, that's a great piece of infrastructure regardless, and after we learn a lot more about it and we talk to a lot of people in the ecosystem, if we can't get people to move on over, it would be really good to see through IdeaScale and the innovation management platform for people to utilize the DC fund to build their own variant of Wikipedia on Cardano. So in the coming months, there'll certainly be funding available. If you guys are so passionate about this particular problem that you want to go solve it, then I'd be happy to play Elon Musk with the Hyperloop and write a white paper on a protocol design and really give a good first start. And then you guys can go and try to commercialize that technology as Cardano native assets and Pluto smart contracts, in addition to other pieces of technology that have to be brought in to make it practical. So right now we're in just let's talk to everybody phase, and we'll talk to the Everpedia guys. We're going to talk to Larry, and we're going to see whoever else is in this game. And of course, we have to accept the incumbency as it is. So we're working with obviously the Wikipedia side to improve the quality of not only our article, but all of the articles on the scientific side of things, so that there's a fair and accurate representation of information. One of the reasons why I'm so concerned about this is that I am very worried that Cardano projects will get commercially censored like we were commercially censored. So yes, we do have a page, but it took 5 years to get there, and we're a multi-billion-dollar project with hundreds of thousands of people. If you guys are doing cutting-edge, novel, interesting stuff, I don't want your experience to be the same as ours, where you have to wait 5 years for your project to get a page, even after governments adopt it. That's absurd. No one should be censored, ever. So this is very well a fight for the entire ecosystem, the entire community, not just Cardano, but all cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano have all faced commercial censorship and article deletions during their tenure. So I don't want you guys to go through that. And I'm hoping we can improve that situation, but you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And frankly, the time has come for Wikipedia to be fully decentralized and liberated from a centralized organization and massively variable quality in the editor base. If Legends of Valor has a page, but Cardano didn't have one until recently, Titcoin, a pornography coin from 2015 that's deprecated, no one uses it, has a page, but Cardano couldn't get one. There's something seriously wrong with the quality control mechanism, and we need to improve that. So it'll get done. Okay. Let's get to your questions. And the advantage I have with this new software is I can just click on your question, and it will come up for everybody. Hi, Charles. Anything you guys are working on in the medical spectrum? So many of you know that my dad is a doctor, my brother is a doctor, my uncle's a doctor. They've treated hundreds, if not thousands, of COVID patients by now. My uncle's actually an infectious disease doctor over in Hawaii, and dad and brother are both internists. They're primary care physicians. So medicine's been a family a long time. My grandfather was an OBGYN. He went to medical school, I think, in the 1950s, and he delivered thousands of kids over his career. So it's near and dear to my heart, and I do a lot of agriculture work these days, and eventually that kind of dovetails into biotechnology. At some point, you're genetically engineering plants. At some point, you're doing all kinds of chicanery in a lab. In fact, I am just getting to mycology, and I have started growing mushrooms on my farm with a mycologist that actually left California, lived in Tahoe, and moved in with me. And the mycologist is actually figuring out how to grow lion's mane and reishi and oyster mushrooms and other such things. And actually, I love to sell some supplements for that. So if anything, I'm learning a lot about ag tech, and I'm learning a lot about biotech through that process. And we, of course, service lots of contracts or bid on lots of contracts throughout the world that involve ag tech or supply chain. Now, the most obvious intersection of Cardano and blockchain technology to the medical industry is the transmission of access rights for medical records. Blockchains are not good medical record databases, but they are very good audit logs and permission logs. So you have a situation where you have an EMR, an electronic medical record system. Let's say it's OpenVista or Epic or whatever. And let's say you are in the state of Virginia and you go skiing in Wyoming and Jackson Hole, and you roll down the mountain, break your leg, and now you have a compound fracture in your femur, quite serious. Okay, and you lose consciousness. The emergency medicine, they take you into the ER, and you're out. The doctor at the ER doesn't know who you are. He's never seen you before. He's never met you. Might not even know your name. Let's say you didn't have your driver's license on you, and somebody just found you. Okay, so there's a problem of how does that physician know your story to treat you properly? Now, in the United States, Virginia to Wyoming, maybe we can broker something out. Now let's extend the story. Let's say that you are skiing on a mountain in an African nation, and you are found a day later unconscious. You're still around, but barely. How does a doctor in Africa know who you are and get your medical records? What does the guy call and say, okay, this is so-and-so in Tanzania, and I found this person, I think it's John Smith. Can you send over all of his medical records so I know, all the relevant information to treat him? It's really hard to get that, okay, because there's no trust in that relationship. So blockchains are great because you can broker identity and you can broker access control, and you can create all kinds of protocols in certain events. Third parties can be entrusted to make judgments of whether things get brokered or not. So they can look at a record and they say, oh, Jane Smith is the person you contact. And they call up and say, I have John Smith here. He's unconscious. Here's a picture of him. Here's what's happened. I need to have you give me authorization for his medical record. So, oh, of course. And then all of a sudden the doctor can now send over all the files and give the doctor zero access to those pieces of information so they can treat you. Okay? Very important, medical record portability, and I think that alone justifies blockchain's participation. Now, the actual storage of the medical records, the access control and change management, that audit log makes a lot of sense. Which doctors and nurses and other medical personnel touched your medical records? How did they touch them? When did they touch them? These things should be auditable, time-stamped, and immutable. But the actual records themselves are very pervasive. Like if I get body scans with CAT scans and MRIs, the data files would be in the gigabytes, perhaps terabytes with future imaging technology. And genetic sequences and these other things, you could easily look at a petabyte of data about a patient 20 years from now. It makes no sense to put that in an immutable format on a blockchain. So we will definitely look at medical records brokering and change and access control. I think that's quite non-controversial. And the easiest way to have that discussion is probably through a standards body. So one area that we'll probably, because we're now a member of that standards body, is the Hyperledger Foundation under the Linux Foundation, the Hyperledger group. We'll probably see if we can propose a Hyperledger project or some standard about access control, and perhaps even a DSL to manage the negotiation and movement of medical records. And we can make that cross-blockchain. Watch Fantastic Fungi, great movie from Hank. Yeah, that's Paul Stamets and the other guys. And Paul's a great guy. It's amazing to me that he couldn't get distribution for that movie. And there are so many magical properties with mushrooms. Cordyceps are great for the treatment of diseases, and they're a great pesticide. Lion's mane is a nootropic, and it can regenerate neurons. And there's some peer-reviewed studies about that for the treatment of dementia. It's quite amazing, and it's just in its infancy, mycology, in terms of its mainstream adoption. And then actually psilocybin has been shown by Johns Hopkins, a very prominent medical school and hospital, to actually have very positive clinical effects for the treatment of depression and addiction, with almost no side effects if the right setting is done. So good vibes there. From Farah G, has anyone affiliated with you reached out to anyone affiliated with Joe Rogan Experience? I think, guys, we have to be in the right position for a show of the size, scope, and scale of Joe Rogan. The worst thing that can happen to us is we go on Joe Rogan, everybody loves the episode, it's highly rated, but then there's no net to capture the millions of viewers and bring them into the Cardano ecosystem. So we have to kind of get to a level of scale and progress that Joe Rogan makes sense. Now, Brock Pierce's campaign manager, Brittany Kaiser, and Matt McKibben, the guy who put on the independent convention, are going on the Joe Rogan Experience. I'm very good friends with Brittany and Matt. I've known them for years. Ben Gortzel went on the Joe Rogan Experience. And so I know a lot of people that know Joe, and it's not a matter of access. We can easily talk to them. It's more of a matter of, when are we right? And that's why I say Rogan after Goguen, because we can then talk about the magic of Voltaire and Cardano as an ecosystem and all the things we're doing, and we can show these Africa deals we've done and so forth. It's a much richer, deeper conversation than we will do this, we aspire to do this, or this is coming online soon. It's actionable, and we can create a broad net to capture lots of people and keep those people and keep going back to that channel. So we'll get there. Okay. Great speech in Wyoming. How do you see the power exchange from politics to crypto playing out? What will the key battles be? I often talk about politics because crypto is politics. Crypto has to have an opinion on how your money works, how your identity works, how your property works. Kind of silly to say it doesn't. Crypto is not apolitical at all. The whole reason cryptocurrencies exist is in the absence of political progress or in the existence of political failure. Okay, they're not a status quo mechanism. Database technology is a status quo mechanism. As in our existence, we tend to generate lots of data. People have to go capture that, label that, retrieve that. The more technology we have, the more data we generate, the more human interactions we have, the more data we generate. So it's an organic, natural evolution of database technology. There's no real philosophy behind that. It's just part of existing, right? The more people you have, the more food you have to grow. Stuff like that, okay? So that class of technology is not necessarily political. It's more just a consequence of life. Crypto is political. It came as a direct result of the failure of the 2008 banking crisis and the political response to that banking crisis, and a strong belief that if we do nothing, the money that's in our pockets is going to eventually become useless and worthless. We'll have monetary collapse. Whether you believe that or not, there was a strong belief in that for the Bitcoin, and that's why Bitcoin evolved so quickly and got so much traction and adoption. Identity management, data surveillance, all of these things. People are getting very concerned about Facebook's power and their ability to deplatform people and what they know about you. The same for Google. So there's a strong overlap on your ownership of data, your ownership of your identity, your ownership of your money. And all of these concepts are starting to pull together into a political coalition, and cryptocurrencies carry a particular brand of philosophy. Why must you be political? Because if we get real adoption, governments will attempt to ban these systems. So if you take a position of stay apolitical because it hurts the price if we get political, if we are apolitical, these systems will be either shut down, in which case your price goes to zero because you can't use it anymore, or it'll become co-opted, in which case, yes, it may still have a value proposition, but it's of no use and utility for what it was invented to do. If you just want the technology without the principles, then just wait 10 years and CBDCs will do this for you, as will advancements in securities technology. So when we start seeing blockchainification of the regulators, the infrastructures like NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange and the central banks, all of the things that cryptocurrencies do will go into legacy system. But you'll have no privacy. You can be shut out at a click of a button. Your transactions can be taken from you, or your money can be taken from you at a click of a button, no rights or recourse. And obviously you're at the whim and will of service providers. So the service providers will have total control over the fees that you pay. Don't like the fees? You have no control. It's monopolistic. Okay? If you want an alternative, that's cryptocurrencies. If we're not political, those alternatives will be regulated out of existence and will not be lawful. And the only options you have are the same 5 people who fucked you all throughout your entire life to begin with, but now they're just better at screwing you. So we have to be involved as a community about these things, and we have to think about these things. And if you don't agree with that, I don't think you're getting it. I really don't. Any movement on SCotUS? I did talk to Ben Gortzel. He sent me a giant email about it. I still have yet to reply to it. If I reply to it today, I won't get home till 7 p.m., but I think I might actually take him up on that. Yes, I absolutely do want to do something with that. In fact, his son is doing some really interesting work in automated theorem improving in AI, that nice intersection. And there's a friend of his son's who's like a world top guy based in Prague who's doing this and did a seminar for us at IOHK. So yeah, we will definitely do something, but that's a 2021 thing, and I'll make a whole announcement once we're ready to talk about it. How's the Lambo in the snow? Put the cover on it. Threw in the towel lately. I'll drive it in a little bit. I just got it back. Oil pump went out. Okay, so the only way, this question from Mr. D, Charles, any chance modifying protocol parameters give small pools a better chance of breaking even with hosting costs? Yes, K can increase, and hypothetically it could increase profit margins, but let's say you don't have a lot of pledge, you're a small pool, the only way you're going to make money is if people delegate to you. So it's not good enough to just increase natively K or reduce the pledge requirements. You need marketing. You need the capacity to get people to delegate to you. And right now, we live in a competitive equilibrium where it's all or nothing. I have 1,200 choices. I can click only one tile. Yes, I can create more than one wallet. It's a lot of work to do that. I have to manage more keywords. Most customers don't do that when you have friction points. So the key is not only a K increase, but it's also going to be changing the competitive dynamics to become cooperative and forming coalitions and delegation portfolios via partial delegation. We're working on that. It's actually a very difficult feature to implement because the way that we designed the wallet was designed with a set of beautiful assumptions which made the wallet mathematically pure and made debugging and testing great. So the only option we have with the current architecture is to replicate individual wallets under the hood. So instead of some sharded wallet, you actually have to run 100 instances or 50 instances or however many pools you have. That seems like a lot, but it turns out the wallet's so efficient that there are ways of doing that that's not problematic. So I had benchmarks done that demonstrated we could comfortably run a Daedalus instance with 100 wallets and not have a slowdown in your ability to turn on the wallet, your ability to spend, receive funds, the listing of stake pools, and there's an enormous amount of room for optimization. And the only slowdown would be wallet recovery. But there are ways to dramatically speed that up by about an order of magnitude. So we are working on that. The problem is that multi-asset, extended UTXO, and Plutus, these types of things are in front of that for the wallet backend. So I have two choices. I can either work on hybrid wallets and partial delegation, or I can work on multi-asset and Plutus and extended UTXO. So commercially speaking, I think it's more valuable to the ecosystem to focus on multi-asset, Plutus, and extended UTXO than it is to finish off the tail of partial delegation. I understand how frustrating that is. It's frustrating for me, and there are many things I want to do, but that's the problem with going parallel and having sometimes bottleneck teams, and Adrestia is one of them. So you just have to make trade-offs and compromises, and there's really no way I can add more people to that team. We're already at the law of diminishing returns. Any other developer I add in, we can't parallelize the work, and we're just going to have to work our way through it. So we'll talk about that in much more detail at the product summit, the product update, whatever the hell we call these things, in October and the one in November. But we are aware of it. We know what to do, and you guys are just going to hang in there. Now, one thing, Mr. D, even if K is increased and we have delegation portfolios, you are a small business when you are a pool operator, which means you still have to have a relationship with your customers. You still have to advertise. You still have to go out there and get people to delegate to you. And most businesses fail. So no matter what we do with protocol parameters, what we do with features under the hood, it's always going to be the case that if you're not a good business person, you're not a good business person, and you're not going to succeed. The job of these guilds, the job of good technology, is to make sure that you have support, advice, and best practices that help you get where you need to go. And you don't necessarily have to do it all yourself. But at the end of the day, a business is a business. And you can be a McDonald's franchisee. McDonald's will tell you a lot about how to sell hamburgers and make fries and these other things. They give you a business system and you have a great brand. But if you put it in the wrong location, if you run it in a really bad way, obviously that franchise is going to go under. Michael Lesser says, where are you on the certification of SPOs? By the way, I got some t-shirts from you, Michael. I'll show them off. I don't know t-shirts, but sweatshirts. The certification of SPO, stake pool operators, I think it's a great thing for the, excuse me, for the Cardano Foundation to get involved in to create a certification course. Obviously, I don't feel that certification should be compulsory, meaning you must be certified to be a stake pool operator. But what I can do, if the foundation creates a certification, is I can visually show that certification in the metadata of Daedalus. And your ROI can do the same. So maybe the tile appears slightly differently, like a different color, or there's something around it, or something like that. And I think there should be a big diversity of certifications. So a baseline certification to show that you know what you're doing, but then specialized certifications show that you understand operational security, so you can keep your keys and other things secure. And also qualitative certifications, which show that you have a track record and reputation, or you're doing things to benefit the network, like you're running relays or other such things. So the foundation can do a lot of that. And Fred and I, we meet every week, and it hasn't come up yet in our conversations, but we have historically talked about this with the foundation, and I think they're the perfect entity to do that. Charles, do you have COVID-19? No, there's just been a lot of wildfires out here. The air quality in Colorado is terrible, absolutely terrible. Some of the worst in the United States right now. Same for California. There's been over 1 million acres burned as a consequence of the wildfires. Did you hear about Vossel being in the hospital? I hope he gets well ASAP. I did not. I will immediately contact him. No one told me. Thank you, Justin. Vossel's a very good friend of the project. He's been a good man. Do you have a favorite horror film since Halloween is around the corner? Event Horizon, I think, is just a great space horror. But actually, every Halloween I try to watch the old Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors. Not the new ones; they're junk. But like the ones in the first 10 seasons when Conan O'Brien was the writer. Absolutely amazing. So much fun. From Lance Thomas, Charles, I have friends on St. Helena Island, UK. They have problems with slow internet because their remote internet is quite expensive there. I was on holiday there. I have to pay £20 for 100 megabytes. Well, first off, it's really hard to get to St. Helena. St. Helena is right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. America, Europe, it's right in the middle. And its claim to fame is that Napoleon was exiled twice. The first time he was exiled a little closer to Europe. The second time, they didn't want to take the risk of him escaping, so they put him on St. Helena, which I think is the most remote island in the world. It's further away from anything else than anything else. I think the English government owns it, but it's just like this small little island in the middle of damn nowhere. It's really hard to get to. I think you have to take a ship to get there or charter a private flight. And obviously, they don't have good infrastructure. And it's more like a charity project of the UK government to maintain that island. So I once actually priced out what it would cost to build out infrastructure in an island called Tuvalu, which is a small island nation. And actually, I think it would be equivalent in the costing to build out proper modern infrastructure to St. Helena. Unfortunately, the trade-off for the population's not quite where it needs to be. If they were an independent nation and they could do certain cool things, maybe that conversation could be entertained. But the bigger solution for their internet issue is Starlink, and I think that they can get coverage there quite easily. And it would provide very high-speed, very cheap internet. There was plans to launch an internet satellite. They do have a high-altitude satellite that services them, but as you pointed out, very expensive satellite. Hey, I think Tristan is the most remote island on Earth, not St. Helena. We all have to agree St. Helena is in the middle of goddamn nowhere. And if it's not the most remote island, it's up in the top 5 or 10. I'm literally, that is the place you put people that you just want them to disappear from history, which is why they put Napoleon there. By the way, movie Dune is coming. Yes, it is, from Danny Villeneuve, the guy who did the movie Arrival, and he also was the director for Blade Runner 2049, which is one of my favorite movies. And it's going to be amazing. It looks great. I think it's a multi-part movie, and Danny Villeneuve is the director for Dune. I think he's going to be the guy who actually brings it to life, and all the things he's done are the things necessary to get there. It was kind of like Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings. He was the man of his times, and Danny is the man of his times. What is my Chinese zodiac sign? I was born 1987, the year of the rabbit. I am a rabbit. Silly rabbit. Wubba lubba dub dub from Bill Gates. Good to have you here, Bill. Are you going to play Cyberpunk? I'm assuming you're referring to the Cyberpunk video game that's coming out with Keanu Reeves and all these other guys. It looks very interesting. I wish I had time for video games. I don't even have time to read about them, much less play them. So I don't know. It's gonna be fun. Charles, thoughts on the recent beef between Justin Sun and Filecoin? Was Justin calling it an exit scam? I don't know. I heard that they had a difficult launch. It is always difficult launching a cryptocurrency, so I'm not going to judge anybody for that. But when you raise hundreds of millions of dollars and there's a lot of high expectations, you have to do things really carefully. A lot of stuff could have went wrong with Shelley. A lot of stuff could have gone wrong with Byron, and frankly, a lot of stuff can go wrong with Goguen. It took years of planning, careful thought, and execution to get it out there. And there's only a few people who have so far done that really well in our industry. So we wish him well, and we hope for the best, and we'll see what happens. Do you think Trump actually had COVID and recovered in 2 days? I think Trump had COVID for about a week longer than he let on. I had a friend tell me that Trump had coronavirus that Saturday before the diagnosis on Thursday. And I said, well, that's very interesting, but I didn't believe him. And then I heard about the diagnosis on Thursday, and this particular person is a pretty credible person. He was very serious about it. So I think he had it probably the prior week, and they hospitalized him during the inflammation phase, not the viral phase. And they'd been treating him previously, and so they just wanted to make sure that he recovered from that phase, because that's the phase that kills you. And after it looked like everything looked great, then they discharged him, and then he suddenly had a miraculous recovery very quickly. I don't think there's any reality where he lied about having coronavirus, because there's no fact pattern to support that. The super spreader event was the Amy Barrett nomination, and there were other events that he was at, and many of those people who attended those events got coronavirus, including the former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. So I don't think there's any merit there. And also, to create a conspiracy where doctors are willing to risk their career lying that he has coronavirus, at Walter Reed, that whole medical team. Also, the Dr. Fauci at the NIH, not exactly a big Trump fan, did review his medical records as well when they were clearing him to go and attend the debate. So I think he had it. I just think he probably had it a little bit longer than he let on, which means that he actually did the debate with Biden while being infected with coronavirus. Belial Merck. Charles, I come here often and I never get noticed. Is this even really live? Cry face, cry face, cry face. Well, it is actually live, Belial. It is live. Just for you. From Jonas Rocker. At what point does this con man tell you who hired him to work on Cardano? Oh my God. Con man. We're writing software every single day. We're pushing every single day. There's no conspiracy here. The history of the project is clear. It's sitting on the Cardano Foundation website, and there's audit reports and all these other things. Told everybody all the key facts. It wasn't a very large contract. Total size of the distribution about 70 million, of which we got half. We probably spent about $100 million, and I took 36 million in. It was a loser of a deal from the cash side of the matter. But that's okay. We're here until the job gets done, and we'll keep going till Voltaire and Goguen are where they need to be. And obviously, the network is fully decentralized, and it's well on the road to do that. We're 50% decentralized. As for con man, what did we say we were going to do that we didn't do? From where I come from, you take project financing to go on a 5-year journey, and you say you're going to do research and write code and build an ecosystem. It was a pretty good deal. The EOS people paid $4 billion. They're below that. The Cardano people paid $72 million. They're a lot ahead of that. And we have real world use, utility, and adoption already. We're just getting started. And we're going to have a fully decentralized ecosystem sometime next year. And we'll have a renewal of that contract. You ask who's going to contract it? Oh, the community will. We'll be in a position where the entire Cardano community is going to be able to decide the future of the project. And you're damn right I'm going to come and say Cardano 2025. Here's where we should go and what should we do. And every holder of ADA gets to decide that. Who was the prior contractor? Ultimately, it was the people who paid to build Cardano. And there were 9,914 of them. They lived in Japan and other places. And people told them, this is where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And, and you want to go on this crazy ride? They said yes. And you know what they did? It turned out really well for them, didn't it? We have an ecosystem, but I'm a con man. You're a fucking troll. And this is what you people do. You listen to Chico Crypto and all these other people, you get your head so screwed on wrong, and then you just think you know everything. And you never can actually look at a basic fact pattern. We followed the Paul Halmos style of development. Back in 2015, we said, we care about building a protocol for economic identity for the developing world. We really care about that. And here are the things we need. Here are the design principles: scalability, interoperability, sustainability. And we're going to follow first principles approach. We're going to do years worth of research. The research will guide an engineering agenda. The engineering agenda will conclude when we have the ability to have programmable transactions, governance, and self-evolution, and full decentralization. We are almost done with full decentralization. Smart contracts are imminent. The platform's evolving very rapidly in that respect, and it'll close out in a reasonable period of time. And Catalyst, you guys are already voting. You can download a fucking cell phone app for it. So over time, I'd say probably 6 months, we'll see, the platform will be in a position where the people who founded it, the Emergos and the Cardano Foundations and the IOHKs, will be able to come back and say, here's the vision to get it to the next level, not let's go aspire to do something, but this is how we get 1 billion users for the developing world. And we drive real use, utility, and adoption, and also immunize the system against emerging threats like quantum computation and so forth. And the very fact that we have a community to ask and vote means we did the job, right? We went from nothing, 0 community members, no product, no science, to something so elegant and complex that it is the most advanced cryptocurrency in the world, with the most sophisticated science and code base, and a community informed and capable enough to make decisions about complex topics of evolution and growth. In 5 years' time, in the most competitive environment, and we're in the top 10 amongst thousands of options and have consistently been in the top 15 since we launched. What's the scam, sir? Honestly, the scam is Chico Crypto and these other guys, Molten Tar Monster number 3, who didn't like us. And he decided to take a very negative view of us. And so what did he do? Made a bunch of videos, which turned out to be all lies, every single one of them. And now that we've launched Shelly, and it actually looks like we're going to pull off this whole thing, getting a lot more quiet these days. Because he knows that he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And all the acolytes that listen to him, they can come to my channel, come to my show, and complain and complain and complain. Call me a con man. But you guys, you notice this, they never ever answer, where does the con man come from? This is a broader and bigger problem in our democracy and in free society. People are having real human trouble understanding truth from fiction. Misinformation, fake news, false information, propaganda, it is eroding our critical thinking skills and our ability to actually assess truth from fiction. Coronavirus was the litmus test of that. You hear all this stuff about coronavirus, all this stuff. Okay. And then you say, okay, critical thinking, what framework do I need to look at the world to know what's true and what's not true? You have to make personal decisions soon enough. There are vaccines coming. There are 4 that are in phase 3 clinical trials that are very promising. The AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson, the Moderna, and the Pfizer vaccines. There's going to be all this data and evidence that's presented. Do you believe they're safe and effective? It's your decision. Unless your government forces you to take it, At some point, whether it be at the end of this year where there'll be 100 million doses for at-risk populations, or in the summer of next year when it's available to the general public, you're going to have to make that decision. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to take a position on it, but I'm asking you directly, what do you need to know for you to believe that's safe and effective? Are you just going to outsource that entire decision to a trusted third party? Maybe it's a radio jockey. Maybe it's a friend over the internet. Maybe it's the media. Maybe it's a doctor you know that you trust. Or you're going to sit down and think about it yourself. That's one decision. Then who do you vote for? That's another decision. When you hear something on the media, the news, and they tell you something, do you believe it or not? Why? Why not? So you have this guy, he calls me a con man. Doesn't give you any evidence for the matter. I know where he's coming from because I know this question, its origin. It came from Molten Tar Monster number 3. And really, you say, okay, well, why do you believe what you believe? He can't answer that. Why? Because he actually doesn't know where that comes from. He just took something someone else said and parroted it because thinking's hard. Here's the problem. All the products I sell require critical thinking. You being a member of the Cardano community, that's not free. It's hands-on. We got voting stuff. We got staking and delegation. You got to know how to be your own bank. You have to know how to be your own identity. Okay? Now, there's tremendous liberation and freedom and magic that comes from that power, that superpower, which your entire life you have not had. You could be an MIT astrophysicist. You can be a brilliant doctor. You can be the Pope. And guess what? You still do not, on average, have control over your property, your identity, your voice, your vote, your bank. Okay? Even a head of state, there's something they don't control. First time in human history, that magic is being systematically handed to you as a person. But the caveat is you got to know what you're doing. So, people say I spend so much time on trolls. I don't really care about the trolls. My skin is so thick at this point, I can't even feel it. What I care about is the critical thinking deficit, because I want Cardano to succeed. I want this ecosystem to survive and thrive and grow to 1 billion people. And I have to ask myself, what are the consequences of this ecosystem thriving and growing to 1 billion people? And how do I avoid it becoming co-opted by cults of personality, by strongmen, by leaders? How do we build in checks and balances? Only by a tireless group of people who are capable of critical thinking and making decisions for themselves will you be able to succeed and get to where we need to go, and the human race evolve, get to the next level. Okay? So this is not easy, and I focus on it from time to time. And when I see these curious things, like from Jonas Rocker, they say, oh, you're a con man. It's like, okay, well, you tell me. Where did we screw people? Where did we steal from people? These types of things. It just shows me that there's a lot of work to do, and we as a community have to stay very vigilant about it. Now, the good news is that it's all there. There are books and videos and all these things about how to think, how to solve problems. There's a great specialization on Coursera that's just about nothing but problem solving. If you go to Coursera.org, type in problem solving. There's all these classes that you can take. There's tons of free content on critical thinking and data analysis and understanding statistics. There's all these books that talk about how to interpret reality in the world around you. There's even classes on fake news. It is your duty to consume these things. I'm not going to pay you. No one will pay you. But if you want to use cryptocurrencies and actually take ownership of your life, you have to develop a mindset this way. Recently, the great Randy died. He was a magician, but he was also known as a skeptic, the amazing Randy. And his whole thing was that he was always fighting the paranormal and always fighting these people, these psychics and these other people who claim that they talk to spirits or do all these things. And he said, okay, if any of you can show me proof that you can actually do this in a replicatable, scientific way, I will pay you $1 million. He started that in, I think, the 90s or the 80s, and he never had to pay the bounty. I had, for example, when I went up to Wyoming, a mentalist. comes up to me and he says, I am a mentalist. I have all these superpowers, these magic powers, and if you tell me a number, I will, if you think of a number, I will be able to write the number down because I can read your mind. I can intuit it from magic, and I can show you the number. I say, oh, okay, great. I've thought of a number. And he says, tell me the number, and I'll show it to you on the pad. And I was like, wait a minute here. If we're doing this in a fair experiment, you should write the number down that I'm thinking and hand it to my secretary right over there, who's just standing right there. And I'll tell him the number. He'll turn it around. Right? That would be something. But no, I have to tell him the number. By the way, it was 2 to the 256 power. So, you know, you have to use critical thinking. And you have to understand that we as human beings have cognitive biases. We're not so good at determining fact from fiction. And there are entire industries that erode our capacity to think well. I'm victim to them as much as you guys are. The point of critical thinking skills, infrastructure, and skepticism and the scientific method is to give you the ability to navigate those uncertain waters and arrive at a higher truth. And we need that if cryptocurrencies are to be successful. When Bitcoin integration in Daedalus, RSK is so awesome. We have no plans at the moment for that, but I am actually thinking about spending some time in building a Bitcoin client, become a Bitcoin core developer. If we fail on Ethereum Classic, I think that's the route we'll take. We'll pivot that whole team over. Bitcoin is getting smart contracts, and code is law is very prominent on Bitcoin. So it's the only other platform that subscribes to that belief, and if we can't do that on Ethereum, it'd be fun to do that in Bitcoin itself. But that's a 2021, 2022 thing. Probably do it in Elixir. Crazy but realistic scenario question. Who would take your place if you die from the Rona? I have a group of people at IO Global who will run the company. I have a yellow folder sitting in one of my safes with explicit instructions of what to do in the event of my untimely demise. I have been so close to death so many times in life that I am keenly aware of its finiteness and fragility. So there's a great succession plan, and there's a roadmap until 2025 if I die. After that, I figure they'll be able to figure it all out. From Barron, do you think there is a case to be made to remove lifetime tenure for SCOTUS and federal justices? It depends on what judges do. I am a textualist. Why? Because the point of the judiciary, in my view, is to act as a check and balance for legislative overreach and also ensuring originalist interpretation of law as it was written. The minute that you admit judicial activism, what you have basically done is you say that a justice now has the power, without being elected, without being accountable, and for the rest of their life, to, because they think it's moral and right, to change the U.S. Constitution or whatever judicial system you happen to have. There's no greater example of this than Plessy versus Ferguson. There was nothing in the Constitution that said separate but equal, but this doctrine was invented by racist justices at the Supreme Court. And it took, I think, 70 years, Brown v. Board of Education, for that to be undone. Judicial activism works in both directions. And you can have a small group of people basically change the entire fabric of society, and there's no oversight or accountability. It's very problematic. You know, the other thing is that when you're a textualist, you don't really fear conservative justices. Why? Because they just don't change anything. It's inconvenient for you if you're progressive and you want rights, whether they be marriage equality or whatever it might be, but they don't really change things. They either regress you back to the Constitution as it was written, or they hold the status quo. They don't just go off on bizarre tangents and start changing things. Now, they might regress things you like certain rights and things like that that were invented by the courts, but the point of the legislative process is that you have a mechanism to change your constitution and pass new laws. It is not the place of the judiciary to pass new laws and invent new laws. It's such a moral hazard. You know, it used to not be controversial at all who was on the Supreme Court of the United States. And the greatest example of that, the tale of two justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalia. They were so far apart on judicial philosophy. One was the conservative, one was the liberal. They were as far apart as you can. Do you want to guess what the confirmations were for them? Bader Ginsburg was 97-3. Scalia was 98-0. Despite the fact that they were radicals in their political philosophy and judicial philosophy, it was not controversial at all for their nominations and for ultimately their approvals. Now, because the Supreme Court has become an instrument of social change, and it's viewed as the thing that will fix the bad problems of the Constitution and evolve society in some progressive direction, what we've seen is it's become hyper-controversial. Every justice is now 50-50 or 52-48 or something like that. And if one side doesn't get its way, it wants to impeach the justices or pack the court. This was not what the court was meant to do, and it's become a politicized simulacrum of its former glory. And that's a goddamn shame. So no, I don't think there should be a case to remove the lifetime tenure of the SCOTUS. I think if we're not going to use the SCOTUS correctly, we might as well just get rid of it and get rid of the entire judiciary and create a tricameral house instead of a bicameral house and have a Congress, a Senate, and a super Senate. And just go ahead and appoint some super senators and just have them make legislation and overrule the Constitution and so forth. There is no difference between the legislative body and the judicial body if this is the position that people are going to take. It cuts both directions. It causes nothing but harm. And I'm sorry, 9 unelected people appointed by a president at a particular period of time are not the most qualified people in the world to decide what my constitutional rights are and invent new rights out of thin air. There's a way to change the Constitution, either through a convention or through the constitutional amendment process. Follow that way. There's a way to create federal laws. We create thousands of them every single year in the federal government. Go do that. We live in an imperfect society, of course. That's why we have protests. That's why we have riots. That's why we have a legislative process, why we have elections. And if they don't work, change the way the elections work. I just did a whole speech about that. But don't go crying to a co-opted body and say, because we didn't get our way through the presidency and the legislative branch, we now want you to destroy the legitimacy of the court and demonize an entire branch of people who are supposed to be there to keep checks and balances and have them invent new rights. It makes no sense at all to me. And this is where I agree with Scalia, absolutely. Do you think this divide in our society will lead to armed conflict? Yes. I believe that if we do not change the Constitution and rein in the federal government, put in term limits, and change the way that we elect people and the incentives behind elections, we will have a civil war within 20 years to 25 years in the United States. I firmly believe that. It's like 1850. You know, by 1861 we had a civil war. It didn't start in 1860. It didn't start in 1861. The Civil War started much earlier because of divisions in society, the abolitionist movement in that case and the states' rights movement in that case. And because those differences were irreconcilable, it was a situation that eventually some straw would break the camel's back and it would create a cascading disruption and create an insurrection. And no one is getting along right now. We're all just hating each other. You know, people that you used to like, you used to get along with, you have no problem with. Now you just have to hate that person because that person doesn't follow your political philosophy. It's a shame. And the media is doing this to us, and the electoral system is doing this to us. You know, if you peel back all the layers of Donald Trump, the rhetoric and all this other stuff, he's a pretty standard Republican president. Yeah, there's some special nuances there, but at the end of the day, a guy who used to run the CIA is running the State Department, Mike Pompeo. At the end of the day, Goldman Sachs is running the U.S. Treasury Department. At the end of the day, the rank and file people in that administration are standard Republican operators you would expect to see in the Bush administration, or in some case, the Obama administration. The bureaucracy is mostly unchanged. They tell you we are so close to Hitler, and this man is destroying the entire world. He's just a Republican like any other. When Obama was in the White House, they said the same thing. He is the Antichrist. He's going to destroy the fabric of reality. The whole world is going to fall apart and become one world global government because of this guy. Both sides use this rhetoric to try to tear each other down and delegitimize each other and so forth. Who was running the Treasury during the Obama administration? It was Timothy Geithner, head of the Federal Reserve, the New York Federal Reserve. Really much difference there? Mnuchin versus Geithner? They go to the same dinner parties. You know, so it's the rhetoric, and the rhetoric is tearing society apart. It's making us hate each other. It's making us think that the other side is subhuman, and that because people have different political beliefs, that that person is evil, absolutely evil. And it's forcing us to embrace insane philosophies like critical race theory and this woke cult. And it's, on the other side, creating identity politics on the right. And that's why we see a rise in supremacism. And it's why we see a rise in militias and some people wanting to kidnap governors and kill them. These are the ripples of a revolution, of a civil war. And if we continue down this road where no president is elected is legitimate, no decision made is legitimate, and everybody is doing everything possible to get whatever power they can and then use it to attack the other side, there will be an armed conflict. I firmly believe that. Let's unite on Coinbase. Guys, don't worry about Coinbase. It'll come in its time, okay? It takes time for these things, and especially the larger they are, the more conservative they are. But don't worry about it. Stop asking about it. When the time is right, it will come. Y'all remind me of the impatient 17-year-old kid that wants to get laid. Just be chill. Be a good guy. Be calm. You know, just watch Netflix, you know? Be cool to hang around. Be friendly. It'll happen. It'll happen. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will happen. Just gotta be chill. Most beautiful city. I love Switzerland. I love Zurich. It's an incredible city. I have so many friends there. Love all the restaurants. I love the lake, mountain views. There's certainly smaller cities that have just amazing natural beauty, but for a practical, functional city, that's one of my favorite. Cigar bars are legal. You go to Toronto, cigars are illegal. You can go to cigar bars. They have everything in Zurich. It's great. How will data be validated on a decentralized Wikipedia? You need some sort of community curation reputation system and incentives for truthiness. The same way you validate data with an Oracle system. Right now, it's, do you have a good editor? You're going to be blatantly biased article, radically out there, completely inaccurate. But if the editors are the editors, it gets a page. Neuralicious. I'm 84 and still a virgin. Then you need to watch the movie Benjamin Button. I think we can take care of you. Do you have plans for paper wallet and Daedalus? Yes, we are going to do the QR code paper wallet. Wait for that. Hey Charles, any news on ETC? Is it secure now? I did a 1-hour interview with Bob Summerwall today and Michael Kapelkov from Cointelegraph. So we talked about that. North Korean capital's best city. It's called Pyongyang. You should know the name of that, Mr. Trolleys. And I hear the fish is quite good there. One of these days when regime change happens, I'll visit. And piss on the communist monuments. What is your favorite cigar? Arturo Fluente Hemingways. They are very, very good and very cheap. Charles, is that a peacock mask in the background? Yes, that is actually a performance mask that was used in Cirque du Soleil. And I liked it so much I bought it. Thanks, Tupensy. Yo, yo. What do you fear the most in life? Flying cobras. The Mask. Nope, terrible at poker. Have you heard much about the Great Reset from the World Economic Forum? I've heard some things, not enough to comment about it. Why is Cardano's supply so high? So what I want you to do is go to Google Carlos Hernandez and Google decimal points. Just learn about that. And what I want you to do is for the rest of your life, whenever you hear about ADA, don't think about ADA, okay? I want you to think about kilo ADA, units of 1,000 ADA. And I want you to move the decimal point, a few points. And after you do that, I want you to tell me how much ADA is worth. And I want you to just think in those terms, okay? Can you do that for me, Carlos? I know you can. I rely on you. Are you still into watches? Yes. How's the game going? Thank you. Finally, we got an interesting question. So, I've made some decisions. I am going to go with .NET. I'm going to write the game in F#, and we are probably going to use Unity as the middleware engine, the game engine for version 1. The .NET framework has evolved so beautifully. Xamarin has evolved so beautifully. .NET Core is great. 5 million developers in it. F#5 looks incredible. I'm super happy and excited about it. And also, .NET for games is great. Xbox can be deployed, and there's a nice path to get it to work on PlayStation as well. So if we're going to do cross-platform, that honestly looks like a great path forward. The bindings look quite good, too, for Unity. So we'll also see what Unreal 4 is offering. It's either going to be Unity or Unreal 4. Now, in terms of the rollout of the game development studio, probably going to call it something like Frontier Studios and set it up in Wyoming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up in the city of Laramie, Wyoming, and I'll see if I can get office space at the University of Wyoming or close to the University of Wyoming. In terms of time horizon, likely the second half of 2021. And I'm going to set up 3 groups. There's going to be well, first of all, let's talk about the philosophy of the game development studio. So there are the 3 E's and the N, and every game we build in the studio has to do that. Entertainment, obviously. It has to be fun to play a game. Educational. I'd like you to learn something by playing the game. And experiences. I'd like by playing the game, you've had new experiences you've never had before. Things that just wow you. You say, oh man, that's amazing. And the N stands for narrative. I want you to be consumed into a story, fall in love with the characters and so forth. So we'll have working groups for each of these things. People who are responsible for the experiences, people who are responsible for the narrative, people who are responsible for the entertainment, and then obviously we have to talk around how do we make you learn something new from this. It can be a moral lesson, it can be a mechanical lesson, like a new skill, whatever the hell it is, we want to do that. In terms of experiences, there's things like Mendy and BCI devices and all these. So there's all these new dimensions from VR, AR, and PCI that can be layered into the game. But in general, there's just all kinds of experiential things you can do. Like I can teach you about hyperbolic geometry or non-Euclidean geometry. The magic system can be algorithmic and constructive, where you build spells and rituals and these types of things. You discover new magic and spells. So technology, I think we have the right stack in mind, and I think we have the right design philosophy, and we've kind of settled on a location for that. It'll take me about 6 months to hire the right core group of people to get things rolling and started. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look into a lot of experimental game technology. So we're going to look into algorithmically generated music. We're going to look into GPT-3. And actually, I'm going to talk to Ben Goertzel about this. I think we might be able to do something far surpassing that for generative dialogue. So when you interact with NPCs, the NPCs are actually using AI to generate dialogue and interactions with you. There's been a lot of crazy good experimental stuff in console-based games where you have, forget the term they use for it, but basically you talk to the computer and it generates responses for you. And there's a lot of these like Zork-style text adventures that are there. So I've thought a lot about that, and we'll do something there. And I think there's great people I know in the AI space that can give us some novel and interesting things. We're also going to, of course, build a very beautiful NPC generator that not only creates unique NPCs in the game, so every NPC is totally unique, you've never seen them before, but also it constructs a beautiful narrative and backstory for the NPC as well. And if there's the right logic built in the game, it can fit that NPC logically into the game. Here's an example. Let's say in Middledwarf, the city of Legends of Valor, that you're in the slums, then the NPCs generated there would be contextual to the slums. So there would be a collection of slum-related professions, dwellings, religions, and variants, and NPCs would be generated within that context, including vitals. So if you're in a poor area, you should probably be underfed, so not corpulent. You should also probably have a disease like malnutrition or perhaps some boils or something. You would see that in that area. NPCs generated in the affluent, rich areas, they would belong to much more structured areas. And also the generative dialogue would reflect that as well. So the NPC generator would say, okay, in the rich areas, you have a better educated class of people. Now, what's nice is referential interactions. So if your character is affluent, bathed, well-fed, well-dressed, you should actually get a proper response accordingly. You'll be out of place in the slum, you'll be in place in the aristocratic areas, and people respond to you in kind. This is relevant for Legends of Valor because Legends of Valor was actually the first game that I could identify that had randomly generated NPCs, random dialogue trees. They were, selected from a pre-generated set, but they were still randomized, and actually variable interactions. So some of the NPCs didn't want to talk to you, some of the NPCs did want to talk to you, and it was somewhat contextual to the race of the player and gender of the player, whether you pick male or female, or elf, dwarf, human. Those were your three racial choices that you had. So I have a pretty good framework for how to build games, a pretty good framework for where we're going to do the game studio, the tech stack for it, which I think is quite extensive. Originally I was thinking maybe JavaScript would be the way to go, but .NET has really just been a great ecosystem, and why reinvent the wheel? There's so much magic there with F# 5 and C# 9 and what I see in .NET, what's happened with Xamarin and the cross-app deployment strategy that Microsoft has, and there'll just be no friction with that kind of a framework. The first 6 months will be hiring and tool building, and then what we're going to do is build up departments that focus on those 3 E's and the narrative, the end, and each and every one of them will intersect. And then the other thing is that we're going to bring in some outside experts to kind of look at what we've done. So we're going to write the entire story for the game and all the NPCs, and then we'll bring literary critics and philosophers in to actually kind of look at the overarching narrative and story. Like the Wisecrack guys, for example, do on YouTube when they talk about things. And we'll say, well, were there any themes or allegories or other things that we could perhaps refine or things. So we'll rewrite the scripts a few times until we get quite happy. In the meantime, the tech guys will be building out the world engine and the NPC generator and getting the graphics assets where they need to be and so forth. And yeah, actually for the NPCs, we'll do motion capture. So you wear the green suits and put on the dots. And if you guys actually want to see how that's done in practice, there's some great behind-the-scene videos for God of War with the guy who played Teal'c in Stargate, who does the voice for Kratos, and then also Hellblade. If you want to see Senua and how they do that, and you can do it at a very low cost. It used to be millions of dollars, but you can actually set up a motion capture studio for about $500,000. It's really incredible, and it's top technology. You record in 8K, and you feed it all the assets into the game engine and all these other things, and you actually get realistic facial expressions and emotions, and when they cry, it cries. Everything renders just absolutely beautifully, especially with the upcoming consoles, the Xbox X and PlayStation. Now, this is relevant to Cardano. We will put some form of blockchain-based DRM system and non-fungible asset system into Legends of Valor when we rebuild the whole thing. So your licenses for the game will be a token on Cardano, and your game items will be inside Cardano as well, somehow, some way, and tradable. So if you find something very unique, then those unique items you can potentially resell, and maybe we'll connect it to trusted hardware or not. This is another reason to go with .NET, is that there are SGX extensions for that, other things like that we can enforce. So a lot to think about, but I have pondered it, and a lot of things I really want to do, like algorithmically generated music. I looked into the Uterpi project, which came from Yale, and they did computer-based music generation. And I've also looked at a lot of AI-driven music design. And so what I want to do is a hybrid soundtrack, where we pay a symphony and we generate a beautiful soundtrack. New World Computing did an incredible job with Heroes of Might and Magic. And I really think Troika Games did a great job with Arcanum as well. It would be beautiful to do a soundtrack. You can go to an Eastern European orchestra and rent them for a few weeks for pennies. It's not very expensive to do that, and you can just get incredible quality. In terms of the conductor, the composer to work with them, Max Richter or Raman Djawadi would be a good choice. I even thought actually about seeing if, because I have a friend who works with me. He does the Waves investment. Before he worked on the C Fund for Waves, he was Trent Reznor's manager. So it would be cool to bring Raman Djawadi, who did the soundtrack for Game of Thrones and a lot of other things like Westworld, for example, together with Reznor, have them collaborate together and do the baseline soundtrack, but then have AI music artists come in and do the generative music component. So you basically generate music inspired from that base stuff, but it's connected to inputs inside the game world. So that's an example of experiences where we bring something new to the gaming world, where you don't have this repetitive soundtrack that happens over and over again. Instead, you have a range, and you kind of mix it up and randomly sample it through. And it's connected to your character, it's connected to your interactions and what's going on in the game, plus the baseline that Djawadi and Reznor did, if they do it. And then what's nice about that means that your replayability, you never hear the same soundtrack twice. It's always new, and it's actually always novel and interesting. If you're interested in this, there's actually IBM Research used an AI to generate new Beatles songs. If you type in like IBM Beatles on YouTube, you can listen to, it's like Daddy's Car or something like that is the name of the song, but actually a song written by a computer that sounds like a Beatles song. So there's an enormous amount of progress that's been made there, but it's mostly in the lab, and it needs to be pulled out of the lab and put into an actual game engine. I'd like to also have a variable physics engine as well, where you can play around with the gravity coefficient, you can play around with the atmospheric conditions, all these other physics coefficients, and so as a consequence, you can manipulate the world. Your magic system should be the parameterization vehicle for that. So spells allow you to change these things, or certain environmental effects would change these types of things. Like, for example, like a fireball spell, third level spell, standard Dungeons and Dragons. It's like the big transition when you go from level 4 to level 5 as a wizard. You get fireball. Okay, great. Well, if you actually could do something like that, it would be like creating a pyroclastic cloud. if you see a volcano erupt, you'll see what that means, especially the more powerful versions of that. So the wind is as damaging as the fire can be. So, if you have a proper physics engine, then spells should also have physical implications. Magica did this, and also the Divinity series did this from Larian Studios. And you could actually mix and match environmental effects. So if you wet the ground and then use a lightning spell, then it conducts it and causes all kinds of problems. Okay, so it would be really cool to have the physics engine give you these new experiences and so forth, especially given that you can have like real life aspects, like the bricks can have weight, you have telekinesis, you can move them, the weight is contingent to the damage and so forth. And really intuitive, clever players can do interesting things. So, and also I'm a big fan of the Portal series, and so it'd be really cool to put that into the Magic system as well. So the more roguish characters can like portal from one side to the other side, jump and stab someone or something like that. So a lot to think about across the spectrum, but I have a pretty good framework for all of it. We'll build it up to a certain threshold where it's almost ready, and then likely what we'll do is do what Pillars of Eternity did and Pathfinder did and these other games, and go and do a crowd sale on Kickstarter and also through other platforms as well, and raise a lot of funding for the game. So I'll pay to get it to a certain level of prominence, and once we de-risked everything and we have an approach, it's just a matter of roadmap, and then that's a great way of pre-distributing the game because you're selling software licenses for that, and this will give the community a chance to participate because, like Pillars of Eternity or other things, if you put enough money into it, you can become a character in the game or have some control over the narrative of the game or get special rewards or so forth. So the short answer to your question is great. Tupan C, have you heard of a game called Noita? 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 Best algorithmic magic system I've ever seen with some pretty cool emergent behavior, nothing like accidentally killing yourself while building a spell. Well, Denny, I have not, and I'm going to write that down, and I will look at it myself. I haven't really done serious due diligence. I bought a book on game magic, and I read it, but it didn't come up. As a user, can I create an NFT on the game myself? That'd be really interesting to explore. It's hard to enforce that in a non-MMORPG with a centralized server, but it may be enforceable with trusted hardware on a computer and create a decentralized MMORPG in a certain respect. So why this is relevant to Cardano is that all the game stuff I do with my studio will open that framework, and then other people can deploy video games with those same things. So we can bring the video game industry into the Cardano space. Favorite Pink Floyd song? Wish You Were Here. If you have to be alive in 2150, where on the planet would you like to be a citizen of? The United States of America. All 78 of them. The best place I've found is Crypto Supreme to buy IOHK swag, Monica Wiley. Her question is there any place we can buy IOHK swag? Wow. I could see California splitting the 28 states. Realistically, 3. And frankly, if Northern California left, they'd probably be a bit redder than the southern parts, and I'd probably live there. It's one of the prettiest places in the world, and I love the climate environment. It's just, the state's a bit crazy. 14-15% tax rates. And the regulations they have. No. You can't, they're going to ban the sale of gas cars by 2035. It's crazy. Cali's crazy. Joe Rogan left. Oh, guys. Come on. Give me a good question. Pacquiao versus McGregor. Pacquiao. I love McGregor. I really do. He's so much fun to watch, but man, he's my boy. Did you ever have a chance to watch the documentary Cryptopia? Cardano was only mentioned at the end. No, John, I have not seen it. Were we well received? Or was it one of those, wow, Cardano, and then just moved on? Check out the Alex Jones on the new Joe Rogan episode that was released a couple hours. Alex Jones was on Joe Rogan again? What? It was like the last one was 5 hours. It was crazy. We had DMT aliens. How is Phil Wadler doing, Charles? He's still working hard on Plutus. In fact, we had 4 papers accepted for conference, for peer review conference, that are all related to his work stream. Phil is really just killing it. He's doing great work. Actually, this one, let's see here. It's a TCP/IP question. Ah, missed it. Damn. Did you ever consider getting LASIK eye surgery? No. I'm going to wait until they have cybernetic eyes and replace my eyes with cybernetic eyes so that I can see multi-spectrum. I can see infrared light, and other parts of the spectrum and colors human beings normally can't perceive. And of course, they'll be loaded with augmented reality stuff. And so it'll bring up all this contextual information about the world around me. It'll work really well with my Neuralink implant, which will augment my brain. Until such a day, I think I'll just stay with the glasses. Ah, this is the one. Andrew Wild. That's a good name. Do you have any thoughts on the recent discovery of security holes in Windows TCP/IP? There are many. Some known, some unknown. Some are purposely not patched because Microsoft waits for the national security infrastructure to utilize them for hacking of foreign systems. And then they fix it 3-6 months later. So they have these windows where they give it to the NSA to take advantage of. That's been well documented. This is just why you do formal verification. And to Microsoft credit, they have a project called Project Everest, which is working at redoing the entire web stack with formal methods. And they've made some great progress along those ways. But you really need to do that. What do you think of Kaspersky Labs? Russian antivirus company. Nothing special. Tightly coupled with Putin. Charles, what are your thoughts on psychedelics? You should read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. All right, kids, we're almost done here. Unless there is anything else that is just so and amazing, I think I might clip it here. Well, kids, I think that's where I'm going to clip it. Good night. This was a lot of fun. I'm going to go get some dinner.